I knew something was wrong the moment. The man at the edge of my fire wouldn't look at me, only past me, into the trees. Like he was afraid to let whatever stood there know he'd been seen. I had chosen the campground, precisely because it was empty. No reservation tags clipped to posts. No glow of other fires breathing between trunks. No distant laughter or radios bleeding through the dark. Just a gravel loop carved into a bowl of pine and fir. The kind of place people skipped because it sat too far from the highway and offered nothing Instagram-worthy. That was the point. I wanted quiet so complete. It felt like pressure against my ears. My tent was pitched just beyond the fire ring, close enough that the heat brushed my shins when I sat, far enough that sparks wouldn't kiss the nylon. The air smelled like sap and cold earth. My coffee mug steamed faintly, bitter and comforting. And somewhere deep in the woods, something small moved. Leaves whispering, a branch flexing and settling. Normal sounds. Harmless sounds. I told myself that deliberately, the way you do when you're alone and dusk is tipping toward night. The fire was the only color that mattered. Orange and gold, licked up from split logs, throwing a wavering boundary around me. Beyond it, the forest collapsed into layers of blue-black, trunks stacking into each other until depth stopped making sense. I kept my headlamp off. I wanted my eyes adjusted to the dark. I wanted to feel competent out here. That was when I saw him. He didn't step into the light so much as appear at its edge, a shape resolving itself from shadow. A man, thin, backpack slung low, standing too still. The first thing I noticed was his silence. No crunch of gravel, no cough, no polite clearing of the throat. Just there. I straightened, hand reflexively curling around the handle of my mug. "Hey," I said, pitching my voice calm. "Can I help you?" He flinched like I'd snapped something close to his ear. He took a half step back, then forward again, rocking on his heels. The firelight caught his face in fragments. Stubble, chapped lips, eyes sunk into shadow under the brim of a filthy cap. "Sorry," he said quickly. His voice was soft, almost breathless. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." "You didn't," I lied, because that's what you do. "You okay?" He nodded too fast. Yeah, His gaze slid past my shoulder, into the trees behind me. Not a glance, a fixation. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing what little color they might have had. "I thought I saw someone, thought this site was empty." "It is," I said. "At least it was when I got here," he swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed like it wanted to escape his throat. Right. He forced a smile that didn't quite stick. I'll go. Sorry again." He didn't wait for me to respond. He turned and melted back into the dark footsteps, finally announcing themselves as a soft retreat through needles and dirt. I sat there for a long moment, listening to the forest resettle around his absence. People wander through campsites all the time, lost hikers, curious passersby. It didn't mean anything. I told myself that while I fed another log into the fire and watched the sparks spin up and vanish. I told myself that while the darkness pressed closer, thick and patient. I told myself that while a faint unease slid under my ribs and refused to move. Hours passed. The fire burned down to coals. I heated soup and ate it straight from the can, the metal warming my palms. Night deepened. The stars sharpened overhead, cold and distant. The forest noises thinned, stretched out, like the world was holding its breath between movements. I was rinsing my spoon when I heard running. It came from the tree line, hard and uneven. Someone not caring where their feet landed. I stood, heart spiking, headlamp snapping on and cutting a white cone through the dark. He burst into the light like he'd been thrown. The man Elias Vance. I would learn his name later, though in that moment he was just a bundle of fear and sweat, staggered to a stop at the fire ring. His cap was gone. His hair was slicked flat to his skull, oily and matted. His shirt clung to him, darkened with sweat or something else. I didn't want to identify. His eyes were wild, darting. And when they locked onto mine, there was relief there, sharp and desperate. "She's here," he said. "What?" My pulse thudded in my ears. "Slow down. Who's here?" He bent forward, hands on his knees, gulping air. When he straightened, he did it carefully, like sudden movement might break something fragile. His gaze flicked behind me again, stayed there, his body angled away from that direction, every instinct screaming retreat. "You," he said, "You followed me. I don't know you." I said, "You came by earlier. That's it." His mouth twisted. "You don't have to lie. She hates lies." A cold ribbon slid down my spine. "Who hates lies?" He laughed a short, ugly sound. "See, you do know." I took a step back, keeping the fire between us. "Listen, you're not making sense. If you need help, I can call." "No," the word ripped out of him. He clapped a hand over his mouth like he'd said too much. His eyes flicked again. Behind me, pleading now. "Don't do that. She'll hear." The woods behind me were still. My headlamp washed over trunks and low brush, catching nothing but bark and shadow. The subtle night sounds had gone thin again, like someone had turned the volume down a notch. "There's no one there," I said, more sharply than I meant to. "You're scaring me." "I know," he whispered. "I know. That's why she picked you." "Picked me for what?" His gaze snapped back to my face, searching. "You really don't know." "Number," he studied me for a long, awful second. Sweat traced clean lines down his dirty cheeks. His hands shook. "Then why did you follow me out here?" "I didn't," I said. "I've been here all evening." "She was with you earlier," he insisted. "I saw her, standing right there." He gestured vaguely, not at the trees, but at the space behind my left shoulder, close enough that I felt the urge to twist away. I thought maybe you were together." My mouth was dry. There was no one with me. The fire popped, sending a spark skittering across the stones. Elias flinched hard enough to stumble. His eyes never left that empty space. "You're still doing it," he said hoarsely. "Doing what?" "Letting her stand behind you." "I'm alone," I said, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I believed it. He took a step back, then another, boots crunching. His breathing sped up shallow and fast. "She moves when you don't look. Did you know that? She hates being seen directly. Makes her itchy." A faint sound brushed my ears then, not quite a rustle, not quite a breath. The ambient noise of the forest warped, stretched, like someone had pressed a thumb to a record. I told myself it was wind sliding through the canopy. I told myself a lot of things very quickly. "Stop," I said. "Just stop." He shook his head, hair plastered to his forehead. "I tried, God, I tried. I kept my eyes on her. I didn't blink for." He swallowed hard. "Doesn't matter. She likes you better." "Why?" He laughed again, hysteria cracking through. "Because you don't turn around." My shoulders burned with the effort of staying still. Every muscle screamed at me to look, to confirm the emptiness I knew was there. The firelight flickered, throwing my shadow long and warped across the ground, a second self reaching into the dark. "You're sick," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "You need help." "So do you," he said gently. "That's the worst part. You don't even know yet." He backed away another step. The boundary of the firelight crept up his legs, his torso, his face. His eyes were shining. Fever. Bright. He was crying, silent tears cutting tracks through grime. "I can't do it again," he whispered. "I can't watch." "Watch what?" His gaze flicked one last time behind me. He went very still. His face slackened, horror hollowing him out. "Then why?" he asked, voice breaking. "Are you with her?" Something exhaled. It was so close it raised the hairs along my neck. Not loud, not even distinct. Just the intimate suggestion of breath, warm against skin that suddenly felt too exposed. Elias screamed. He turned and ran, plunging into the forest without looking back. Branches cracked, footsteps tore away, then faltered, then disappeared entirely. Swallowed by distance and dark, I stood there, frozen, the fire snapping and hissing at my feet. My headlamp beam wavered as my hand shook. The woods behind me were empty. Of course they were. Empty and indifferent and vast. I broke. I killed the fire with frantic splashes from my water jug, embers dying in sullen clouds of steam. I yanked my tent stakes free, fabric collapsing into a tangle. I didn't pack carefully. I stuffed and shoved and tore, heart hammering so hard it made me dizzy. Every sound felt amplified. Zipper teeth rasping, plastic crinkling, my own breath rasping in my ears. I didn't turn around. I threw everything into the back of my car, slammed the hatch, and climbed into the driver's seat. My hands slipped on the wheel. The headlights washed over the campsite, over the fire ring now dark and cold. over the trees standing shoulder to shoulder, like a crowd that refused to disperse. As I pulled away, tires spitting gravel, I felt it then, pressure, like someone leaning close to whisper a secret. I kept my eyes on the narrow road, on the slice of safety ahead, and I drove until the forest thinned and the dark loosened its grip. I didn't stop shaking until dawn. I told myself later that Elias Vance was unwell, that isolation and exhaustion had cracked something in him, and I'd been unlucky enough to wander into the fallout. I told myself that the sound I'd heard was wind, the breath, a trick of nerves. I told myself I'd been alone, but sometimes, in quiet rooms, when I catch my reflection in a darkened window and feel that familiar prickle along my neck, I remember the way his eyes never left that empty space. I remember the certainty in his voice, and I wonder what he saw standing behind me. I wonder why it still feels like it never left. The first time he screamed at me, the coffee pot was still gurgling, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that the sound didn't belong inside a place this bright. Graveyard shifts teach you the shape of silence, not the quiet kind you get in a bedroom at night, but the kind that hums, fluorescent lights buzzing, refrigerators breathing, the distant sigh of trucks rolling past on the highway. The station sat off Route 17, like a forgotten tooth, all glass and white tile, glowing too hard against the dark fields. From the outside, it looked safe, clean, predictable. Inside, it was just me, the register, and the night. I worked the counter and the grill, poured burnt coffee into chipped mugs, wiped down the same stretch of laminate until my reflection warped back at me. Most nights blurred together. Same faces, same routines. Truckers with red eyes and nicotine breath. College kids daring each other to stay awake. Men who never quite looked at me, and men who looked too much. And then there was Art Mosley. He came in every night at exactly 1:12 a.m. I noticed because the bell over the door always rang the same way. 2 sharp chimes, and then a soft rattle, like it was embarrassed to be heard. He'd push through with his shoulder, blonde hair slicked back and shiny under the lights, and head straight for the stool by the window. Never the counter, never the booth. The stool by the window, where the glass looked out onto nothing but dark highway and a low ditch full of weeds. Coffee, he'd say. Not a question. I'd pour it black. He never thanked me, never complained either. He'd sit there, hands folded around the mug, staring out the window as if something was going to step out of the dark and wave back at him. At first, I thought he was waiting for someone. Then I thought he might be lonely. Then I stopped thinking about it at all. Routine has a way of dulling curiosity. Art was normal, too normal maybe. Clean denim jacket, work boots scrubbed to a dull brown. His face was pale, soft around the jaw, with a mouth that always looked like it was holding back a comment. His eyes were light blue or gray, depending on the night, but I rarely caught them straight on. He didn't look at people. He looked past them. Once, during a storm, the power flickered and the lights dimmed for half a second. I felt it before I saw it, the sudden pressure of being watched. I looked up, and for the first time, Art wasn't staring out the window. He was looking at me, not leering, not smiling, just looking like he was trying to memorize my face before it disappeared. When the lights steadied, he turned back to the glass. My skin prickled for a long time after that. Still, if you'd asked me then, I'd have said he was harmless. Everyone needs a place to sit and stare sometimes. Then he stopped coming. One night passed. Then another, a week. I caught myself glancing at the door at 1:12 a.m., waiting for the bell. It didn't ring. His stool stayed empty, reflecting the ceiling lights like a blind eye. "Your boyfriend stands you up," one of the truckers joked when he noticed me looking. "He's just a regular," I said, sharper than I meant to. 2 weeks went by. 3. His absence became its own kind of presence. The window felt wrong without him there, like something had been moved and not put back. I told myself it was nothing. People disappear from routines all the time. New routes, new jobs, new lives. But sometimes when I wiped down the counter late at night, I caught the faintest smell near his stool. Not coffee, not grease. Something damp animal. I blamed the mop water, the drains, my imagination, stretching in the dark. The night he came back, the bell rang wrong. It was a single, heavy clang, like the door had been hit instead of opened. I was behind the counter, counting change, when the smell reached me. Stronger this time, wet earth, old sweat. A sourness that made the back of my tongue curl. I looked up. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. The man in the doorway was bent forward, shoulders hunched, as if he was carrying weight no one else could see. His hair hung in ropes around his face, blonde gone dark with grease and dirt. His jacket was gone, replaced by a shredded hoodie that clung to him like it had been slept in, sweated in, fought in. His jeans were torn at the knees, stained black and brown. His boots were caked with mud. He stood there, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the floor. "Art?" I said before I could stop myself. His head snapped up. Under the lights, his face looked wrong, thinner, sharper. His cheeks were hollow, skin stretched tight as if something inside him had shrunk. There were scratches along his neck, half-healed, and his lips were cracked, bleeding at the corners. His eyes caught the light. They shone, not the dull reflection you get from tired eyes, but a sharp, bright glint, like a cat caught in headlights. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the fluorescence. He flinched back, one hand flying up to shield his face. "Don't," he rasped. His voice scraped, like it hadn't been used in a while. "Don't look at me." The words hit the room and fell flat. The refrigerators hummed on. The coffee pot bubbled. The world didn't end. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. Are you okay?" He laughed. It was a short, broken sound that turned into a cough. He staggered past the counter, not toward his usual stool, but toward the back hall. The bathroom door slammed so hard it rattled the framed cigarette price list. The lock clicked. Then there was nothing but the sound of his breathing. It came through the door in wet, panicked bursts, like someone trying to suck air through mud. I stood frozen, hands gripping the edge of the counter, listening. Every breath ended in a whine, a high animal sound that made my scalp crawl. "Art?" I called. My voice sounded too loud, too thin. No answer, just breathing. Faster now. I told myself he was drunk. On something. People came through here like that all the time. I'd seen men cry in booths at 3 a.m, seen women sleep in bathrooms with their heads on the sink. This wasn't my business. I wasn't trained for this. Still, my feet carried me toward the hall. The bathroom light was off, complete darkness behind the door. The crack beneath it glowed faintly from the hall lights. And I saw something shift there, a shadow moving back and forth. "Hey," I said softly. "If you need help, I can call someone." The breathing stopped. For a second, the silence was so complete it felt like pressure on my ears. Then, from inside the dark, I heard him whisper, "Please." The word was stretched thin, barely there. "Please don't look at me." I reached for the door before my brain caught up. My fingers wrapped around the handle. It was warm. I hesitated. Every instinct I had screamed at me to step back, to call the cops, to lock myself behind the counter and wait for dawn. But there was something in his voice, fear so raw it felt contagious. I pushed the door open. The darkness swallowed the light. For a moment, I couldn't see anything. The air inside was thick, heavy with that damp animal smell. My eyes adjusted slowly, outlines forming, sink. Mirror, the stall door, half open. Then I saw him. He was crouched in the corner, pressed against the tile, knees pulled to his chest. His hands were clamped over his face, fingers digging into his own skin. Through the gaps, his eyes burned. They reflected the hall light like coins at the bottom of a well. He looked up and he screamed, "Don't look at me." The sound tore through me. It wasn't just loud. It was wrong, pitched too high and too low at the same time, vibrating in my teeth. The air seemed to warp around it, the edges of the room blurring, as if my eyes couldn't agree on what they were seeing. He launched himself at me. I remember falling back, my shoulder hitting the doorframe. His weight slammed into me, knocking the breath from my lungs. His hands clawed at my face, fingers scraping my cheeks, my forehead, my eyes. "Don't look," he howled, over and over. "Don't look, don't look, don't look." I squeezed my eyes shut, hands flying up to shield my face. The world became noise and pain, and the sickening thud of my head hitting the tile. His breath was hot against my skin, sour and metallic. I felt his nails dig into my scalp, tugging at my hair. Something wet splashed my cheek. Blood, his or mine. I didn't know. I screamed, or tried to. The sound came out strangled. Then, just as suddenly, he was gone. The pressure lifted. His weight vanished. I heard his footsteps pounding down the hall, the bell over the door screaming as he burst out into the night. I lay there for a long time, eyes still shut, heart hammering so hard I thought it might tear loose. When I finally opened them, the bathroom was empty. The darkness seemed deeper without him, like it was holding its breath. I locked the doors, called the police with shaking hands, gave my statement through a mouth that wouldn't quite form words. They found nothing. No sign of him outside. No fingerprints they could use. No record of a man named Arthur Mosley in the system. The officer who took my statement kept glancing at my scratched face, his eyes lingering on the marks near my eyes. "Are you sure you didn't know him?" he asked. "I knew him," I said. "He came in every night." The officer nodded slowly, like he didn't believe me. I didn't sleep for days. When I did, I dreamed of eyes in the dark shining back at me. I woke up with my hands over my face, whispering, "I'm not looking." A week later, the news ran a short piece. Local woman found dead in her home. Husband missing, suspected homicide. The photo they showed was old, clean. A man with slicked back blonde hair and pale eyes that didn't quite meet the camera. Arthur Mosley. They said he'd fled into the woods behind their house. That search teams found signs of someone living rough scraps of clothing. Half-eaten animals, muddy footprints that didn't quite look right. They never found him. Sometimes, on my drive home, as dawn starts to thin the dark, I catch a reflection in my rearview mirror. Just for a second, a pair of eyes, bright and watchful, staring back at me from the back seat. I don't look for long. I've learned better than that. The first time I noticed the change in his eyes, the coffee pot was still gurgling, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that human eyes were not supposed to do that. Night shifts teach you how to catalog small things, not because they matter, but because there's nothing else to hold on to. The station sat alone off Route 17, a glass box flooded with fluorescent light, floating in a dark stretch of fields and asphalt. The lights buzzed constantly, a thin electric whine that never quite faded into the background. Refrigerators hummed. Ice rattled in its bin when the air compressor kicked on. Outside, trucks passed like distant weather. Inside, it was usually just me. I learned the rhythms of the place so well that time became predictable. 12:47 p.m., a fuel delivery truck. 1:03 a.m., the older couple in the RV. And at exactly 1:12 a.m., the bell over the door would ring. Two sharp chimes and a loose rattle, like it was reluctant to announce itself. That was Arthur. Art Mosley. He never varied. He came in alone, jacket zipped to his throat, blonde hair combed flat and glossy under the lights. He went straight to the same stool by the window, the one that looked out onto nothing but a drainage ditch and a strip of black highway. He never glanced at the counter displays, never looked at me unless he had to. "Coffee," he'd say. Not rude, not friendly, just factual. I poured it black. He wrapped both hands around the mug and stared out the glass as if the dark owed him something. At first, I assumed grief, or boredom, or the simple habit of a man who didn't like being home. But after weeks of watching him, I realized something else. He wasn't looking through the window. He was looking into it, his gaze fixed at eye level, tracking movement I couldn't see. When headlights passed, he didn't flinch. When lightning flashed during storms, he didn't blink. He sat perfectly still, shoulders squared, posture tight, like an animal waiting at the edge of cover. Once, when the lights flickered during a power hiccup, I felt it before I understood it, the sudden awareness of being observed. I looked up. Art had turned around. Our eyes met for less than a second. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. His shoulders drew back slightly, chin lifting. The lights steadied, and he turned away again. The skin on the back of my neck went tight, like it was trying to pull itself away from the rest of me. I told myself it was nothing. Then he stopped coming. One night passed, then another. The bell stayed silent at 1:12 a.m. His stool sat empty. The vinyl cracked in the shape of his weight. I caught myself glancing toward the door without meaning to, waiting for a routine that no longer existed. 2 weeks went by. 3. The absence felt wrong. Not dramatic, just misaligned, like a painting hung slightly crooked. I wiped down the counter near his seat and noticed a smell that hadn't been there before. Not strong, just persistent, damp, like wet fur left too long in a closed room. I blamed the mop bucket, the drains, the fact that nights stretched your imagination thin. The night he came back, the bell rang wrong. One heavy clang, metal on metal, like the door had been shoved open with a shoulder instead of a hand. The smell hit first. It rolled in low and thick, clinging to the air. Wet dog, yes, but under that, something sharper. The copper tang you get near raw meat. The kind of smell that settles in the back of your throat and refuses to leave. I looked up. The man standing in the doorway was bent forward, arms hanging too loose at his sides. His hair was no longer slicked back. It hung in dark ropes clotted with grease and dirt. His jacket was gone. His clothes looked slept in, fought in, fabric torn at the seams, knees ground thin and blackened. Mud caked his boots. He stood there breathing through his mouth, fast and shallow, eyes locked on the floor. "Art," I said before I could stop myself. His head snapped up, the lights caught his face, and my first thought was that he looked hollowed, like something essential had been scraped out of him. His cheeks had sunk inward. There were half-healed scratches along his neck and jaw, pale lines against skin, gone grayish and tight. Then I saw his eyes. The light didn't just reflect off them. It returned, not a flat shine, but a precise bounce back, green gold sharp as a mirror. Retroreflection, the kind you see in deer on the roadside, caused by the tapetum lucidum, a layer of tissue behind the retina that amplifies low light. Humans do not have that tissue. Seeing it on a man's face made my stomach turn over. He flinched hard, one arm jerking up to shield his eyes. "Don't," he said hoarsely. "Don't look at me." His voice sounded unused, like it had been dragged out of his throat by force. Are you okay?" I asked. That was a mistake. His lips pulled back, not into a smile, but into something strained, showing teeth too quickly. A short, broken laugh escaped him, then dissolved into coughing. He lurched past the counter, not toward his usual seat, but straight down the hall. The bathroom door slammed, the lock clicked. Then came the breathing. It came through the door in harsh bursts, wet and irregular, like someone running on all fours. Each inhale ended with a high, thin whine that made my shoulders tense without my permission. I stood there, hands flat on the counter, listening. "Art," I called. The breathing stopped. The silence that followed felt deliberate. Then, very softly, from the darkness behind the door, "Please," the word trembled. Not weakness. Control stretched thin. "Please don't look at me." I should have stepped back, called for help, locked myself in the office and waited for morning. But something in his tone snagged me, a warning dressed up as a plea. I walked down the hall. The bathroom light was off. The space beyond the door was black, absolute. The crack underneath glowed faintly from the hall, and I saw movement there, back and forth, back and forth. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice low. "I can call someone if you need help." No answer. I reached for the handle. The metal was warm. I hesitated just long enough for my instincts to scream at me. Then, I opened the door. The darkness swallowed the light. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. I smelled him more clearly then. Wet fur, dirt, and underneath it the unmistakable iron scent of dried blood. He was crouched in the corner, pressed tight against the tile. Knees pulled up, his hands were clamped over his face, fingers digging into his own skin. I could hear his breathing again, faster now. "Art," I whispered. He lowered his hands. Our eyes locked. That was the trigger. The moment my gaze met his entire body changed. His shoulders dropped. His spine straightened. The hesitation vanished, replaced by something sharp and purposeful. "Don't look at me." The scream tore out of him, broken and layered, as if two sounds were trying to occupy the same space. It wasn't just loud, it vibrated, distorting the hum of the lights, overwhelming everything else. He launched forward. I didn't feel the impact at first. I just heard the wet smack of my head hitting tile and tasted copper. My vision burst white, then went dark at the edges. His weight crushed the air from my lungs. Hands raked at my face, nails scraping skin, catching in my hair. "Don't look," he howled, over and over. "Don't look. Don't look." I squeezed my eyes shut and brought my arms up, shielding my face. His breath washed over me, hot and rank. Something warm dripped onto my cheek. Blood, his or mine, I couldn't tell. I heard myself screaming. Then, as suddenly as it started, the pressure lifted. Footsteps pounded away. The bell over the door shrieked as he burst back into the night. I stayed on the floor, eyes closed, chest heaving, until the silence settled again. When I finally opened them, the bathroom was empty. The darkness felt deeper without him, as if it had been disturbed and hadn't yet resettled. The police came. They listened. They took photos of the scratches along my face, the red marks on my neck. They searched the area. They found nothing. No record of Arthur Mosley. No sign of him outside. One officer asked me gently if I was sure the man hadn't been an animal. I quit the night shift a month later. I work days now, in a busy office with big windows and too many people. The lights are softer. The sounds are constant and human. I should feel safe, but sometimes, when the office empties and the sun hits my computer screen just right, I catch my reflection staring back at me. I lean in close. I take my phone out and turn on the flashlight. I shine it into my own pupils, checking, making sure the light doesn't bounce back. The first thing I noticed was the disturbance. Because in a building that empty, there shouldn't have been one at all. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clearly a noise at first. Just a low, padded thud from somewhere below my floor, as if a heavy object had shifted and then settled carefully back into place. I stopped typing and waited, fingers resting on the keys, listening to the fifth floor breathe around me. The office had its own nighttime personality. During the day, it buzzed with phones, printers, voices overlapping in messy layers. After hours, it became restrained, almost watchful. Fluorescent panels hummed overhead. The carpet absorbed footsteps. The air conditioning cycled in long, tired bursts that made the whole place feel like it was exhaling. I worked late more often than I admitted to my friends. Data entry was easier when no one interrupted me, when the numbers flowed cleanly from spreadsheet to system without small talk or questions. I had planned to leave by 9, then 10. Then, after I finished one last batch, the disturbance came again. This time a faint rustle, like fabric dragging across carpet tiles. I slid my headphones off one ear and tilted my head. The sound came from below, maybe the 4th floor. The building settled, or at least that's what it sounded like. Instead of sitting there overthinking it, I turned the volume up on my headphones and let the soft drone of instrumental music fill my ears. The spreadsheet snapped back into focus. Columns, rows, control. A few minutes passed before something tugged at my attention again. Not a noise, exactly, but an absence. The HVAC cycle didn't kick back on when it should have. The office felt warmer, sealed. I rolled my shoulders, tension I hadn't noticed easing just slightly, and glanced up. That was when I saw the utility door. It was at the far end of the 5th floor, recessed into an alcove near the stairwell. Beige metal, usually locked. Usually ignored, it stood open, not wide, just enough to expose a vertical slice of shadow behind it. The fluorescence didn't reach inside. The darkness there looked dense, like something you could step into and disappear. I stared at it longer than made sense, trying to remember if it had been like that earlier. I replayed my arrival in my head. Badge swipe, elevator ride, lights coming on row by row. I couldn't recall passing the door at all. I stood and walked toward it, my footsteps vanishing into the carpet. The closer I got, the more the air changed, warmer, stale, and then the smell reached me. Not mold, not dust, human stale sweat and unwashed hair, layered with the sour reek of a mouth that hadn't seen toothpaste in days. It was intimate in the worst way, the kind of smell that meant someone had been breathing in a confined space for a long time. My stomach tightened. I pushed the door shut quickly, not slamming it, but not gentle either. It resisted for half a second, as if something inside had been too close to the frame, then closed with a dull, metallic click. I stood there, heart ticking too fast, listening. Nothing. I realized my shoulders were practically up around my ears. When they finally dropped, I let out a slow breath I hadn't known I was holding. I went back to my desk and sat down, but the numbers on the screen no longer flowed. Every cell felt like a placeholder for something else. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window, face lit from below by the monitor's glow, eyes sharper, more alert than they had been 10 minutes earlier. I didn't put my headphones back on. That was when the sensation started. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't even fear yet. It was the awareness of being oriented toward, like standing with your back to a door and knowing, without turning, that someone is there. I kept typing anyway, one line. 2. Then the overhead fluorescents went out. Not all at once, not dramatically. They simply timed out. One by one, the panels above my section of cubicles clicked off, plunging my desk into shadow. The rest of the floor followed in a soft cascade, illumination retreating until the only remaining glow came from my monitor. I froze. The office lighting ran on motion sensors. Everyone knew that. Wave your arms, stand up, take a few steps, and the fluorescents would snap back on. I didn't move. The silence sharpened immediately. Without the hum of lights or the low churn of the HVAC, the building felt hollowed out. My screen cast a cool blue glare over my hands. The edge of my desk, my coffee mug, everything beyond that narrow halo dissolved into blackness and shadow. I sat perfectly still, terrified of what movement would announce. That was when I heard the footsteps. They were close enough that I could tell they were on carpet, heavy, damp, carefully placed. Each one arrived with intent, a slow compression of fibers followed by a subtle drag, as if the person walking didn't lift their feet all the way. They stopped just outside the glow of my screen. I stared into the void beyond my desk, eyes burning, afraid to blink. If I moved, the lights would come back on. If the lights came back on, whoever was out there would see exactly where I was. The footsteps resumed. One. Pause. Another. Closer now. I felt my pulse in my throat, in my fingertips. My hands trembled against the keyboard. I thought about the utility closet, the smell. How long someone would have had to sit in there for it to linger like that, I whispered. Hello? The word barely existed. It felt absorbed by the room. No answer, just the careful approach continuing, staying just beyond illumination. Like whoever it was understood the sensors better than I did. I stood up. The fluorescents didn't come on immediately. That delay, barely a second, was enough to convince me. They were standing closer than I'd thought. I ran. The lights snapped back to life behind me as I bolted between cubicles, but I didn't look back. I clipped a partition, pain flaring in my arm, and kept going. The stairwell door loomed ahead, its exit sign glowing red and reassuring. I hit the door hard and fumbled the handle. Behind me, footsteps accelerated, no longer cautious, no longer hiding. The door gave way and I spilled into the stairwell, concrete echoing my panic as I took the steps 2 at a time. The harsh stairwell illumination flickered on, exposing nothing behind me but empty space and a slowly closing door. I didn't stop until I reached the lobby. Burly man, tan skin, buzz, cut hair, wearing a light blue security uniform with a badge. The night guard looked up from his desk as I stumbled toward him. Hey, what's wrong? He asked, already standing. There's someone upstairs, I said. My voice sounded wrong, scraped thin, on 5. He didn't hesitate. He pulled the camera feeds up immediately, rewinding with practice movements. I stood beside him, arms wrapped around myself, watching the 5th floor from a distance that suddenly felt obscene. We saw my desk, the motion sensor, lights clicking off, my stillness. Then the utility door opened. A figure eased out, staying just beyond the monitor's glow, head angled as if listening to my breathing. It followed me when I ran, never fully entering the light. My stomach twisted. Then, behind us, the stairwell door handle moved. Just slightly, a slow, testing turn. Burly man, tan skin, buzz, cut hair, wearing a light blue security uniform with a badge. Noticed it at the same moment I did. His hand hovered over the radio. The handle stopped. Sirens arrived minutes later, but the waiting stretched unbearably thin. When police cleared the building, they found the intruder back in the utility closet, pressed into the narrow space behind the panels. He didn't speak. He didn't resist. They said he'd been there for hours. They said he'd been watching. I don't work in offices anymore, but sometimes, when I'm sitting alone in my living room and a light bulb flickers or a room goes dim, I freeze, terrified that if I move to fix it, I'll bump into someone standing right in front of me in the shadow, already knowing exactly where I am. The glass made it worse, because it meant I could see everything, and everyone could see me. Midnight turned the laundromat into a fishbowl dropped into darkness. Inside, the fluorescent glare stayed brutally bright, flattening every surface into harsh whites and sickly blues. Outside, the parking lot dissolved into shadow, the sodium lamps at the far edge barely reaching the windows. The effect was unmissable, me alone and exposed, framed perfectly behind floor-to-ceiling glass. Surrounded by a night that felt thick enough to press against the building. My parents called it keeping an eye on the place. I called it punishment. I worked the overnight shift because I was the only one who could. College classes during the day, tuition that never seemed to shrink no matter how many checks I deposited. The family laundromat paid just enough to make the exhaustion feel necessary. At night, the machines sounded different. Washers didn't slosh. They churned. Dryers didn't hum. They roared and rattled, like something struggling to breathe. The air was heavy with detergent and warm metal, a smell that clung to my clothes long after I left. And I learned quickly that the hardest part of the shift wasn't staying awake. It was realizing how visible I was. I sat behind the counter near the change machine, laptop open but untouched. Most nights were empty, maybe one or two insomniacs folding clothes with headphones in, never meeting my eyes. Tonight, there was no one. The bell above the door chimed softly. I looked up. A man stood just inside the entrance. He wore a dark hoodie with the hood pulled low, hands in his pockets. He didn't carry a laundry bag. He didn't even glance at the rows of machines. He just stood there, letting the door close behind him, the glass reflecting his shape back at itself. "Hey," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "We're open." He didn't respond. He started walking, not toward the washers, not toward the dryers, just through the aisles. Slowly, too slowly. His steps dragged slightly, shoes whispering against tile as he passed machines without looking at them. I watched him from the counter, every muscle tightening. Customers wandered sometimes, especially late at night, but they usually announced themselves with noise, with purpose. This man moved like he was measuring the space, mapping it. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. He paused. For a moment, I thought he might turn around. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, he continued walking. My skin prickled. I stood up, the counter suddenly feeling too low, too inadequate a barrier. He reached the back of the laundromat, near the hallway that led to the storage room and office. He stopped there facing the closed door. Just stood, close enough that I imagined I could hear his breathing if the machines ever stopped. Then, he turned and walked back the way he'd come. Same pace, same dragging steps. He didn't look at me as he passed, didn't acknowledge me at all. He reached the door, pulled it open, and left. The bell chimed again. I stayed standing long after he was gone, listening to the washer spin, to my own pulse thudding in my ears. My reflection in the glass looked too sharp, too awake. When I finally sat back down, my hands shook. I told myself it was over. Weird people wandered in sometimes. That was part of working nights. 10 minutes later, I noticed him outside. He stood near the edge of the parking lot, just beyond the reach of the nearest light. His hoodie blended into the darkness so completely that at first I thought he was just another shadow. He was facing the laundromat, facing me. I couldn't see his eyes through the glass, but I knew that he was looking straight at me, at the counter, at the exact spot where I sat framed in fluorescent glare. I stood up again, heart racing. He didn't move. I picked up my phone and pretended to scroll, angling my body away from the windows. When I glanced back, he was still there, unmoving, watching. Minutes stretched. My mouth went dry. Eventually, he stepped back into the darkness and vanished. I didn't relax. Not really. The rest of the shift unraveled slowly after that. The machines seemed louder. Every reflection in the glass startled me. I checked the time every few minutes, counting down until dawn. That was when I heard the noise from the back. It wasn't loud, just a muted scrape, like something shifting against concrete. The sound came from the storage room, the area behind the staff, only door where detergent pallets and broken machines waited for repair. I froze. Another scrape followed, then a soft thud. My thoughts raced. Maybe a raccoon had gotten in. Maybe something had fallen. But the memory of the man in the hoodie pressed in, heavy and undeniable. I stood and walked slowly toward the back, every step reluctant. The hallway light flickered on automatically, revealing the familiar clutter, boxes, carts, the closed storage room door at the end. I stopped a few feet away. The smell reached me first. Stale sweat, sour breath, human and close. The door handle moved, just a fraction, enough to tell me someone was on the other side. I backed away so fast I nearly tripped. No thinking, just movement. I turned and ran for the back exit. The quickest way out, closer than the front door. My hand slammed into the metal handle, and I yanked. It didn't budge. I pulled again, harder, nothing. My eyes dropped to the handle. A rope was wrapped around it, not professionally, not neatly, just looped and knotted tight, threaded through the handle and around the exterior security bar, pulled until the metal groaned under the tension. My breath left me in a soundless rush. He hadn't just come inside. He'd prepared. A noise came from behind me. The storage room door opening. I spun. He stood in the doorway, hoodie still up, face half, hidden by shadow. Up close, the smell was overwhelming. Unwashed skin, old breath, the stench of someone who had been waiting too long in confined spaces. He took one step toward me. I screamed. The sound tore out of my throat, raw and animal. I lunged for the tied door, fingers clawing at the rope. The fibers burned my skin as I yanked. Panic lending me strength I didn't know I had. The knot shifted. Behind me, footsteps accelerated. I pulled again. The rope loosened just enough to slip free from the handle. I threw my weight against the door and felt it give. I burst into the night, stumbling into the parking lot, the cold air shocking my lungs. I ran toward the lights, screaming until my voice broke. When I looked back, he was already gone. The police came. Statements, flashlights cutting through shadow. They found the rope. They found footprints near the storage room. They didn't find him. The realization settled in slowly, long after the building emptied and the sun came up. He hadn't been wandering. He'd been setting a trap, and I'd been standing in the middle of it, bright and visible, thinking I was alone. The back door wasn't wide open. It was worse than that, just barely unlatched, like someone had changed their mind halfway through leaving. I noticed it because the cold got in first. A thin stripe of winter air slid across the concrete floor and wrapped around my ankles, sharp enough to cut through my boots. The warehouse was supposed to be sealed tight overnight, climate-controlled, predictable. I stopped just inside the entrance, badge still warm from the scanner, and stared at the door at the far end of the loading bay. It wasn't something you'd see if you were rushing. It wasn't dramatic. The heavy metal door sat flush in its frame, lightless, quiet. Except the latch wasn't fully seated, a hairline gap, enough for air, enough for doubt. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening to the familiar hum of the fluorescents overhead. They buzzed with that faint electrical whine that never shut off, the sound I'd come to associate with safety, with routine, with knowing exactly what was around me. My name is Simple Vector Cartoon Man. Tired expression, dark circles under eyes, wearing a dark blue security uniform jacket with a generic yellow badge patch, dark work pants, and heavy black boots, often holding a brown clipboard or a black flashlight. And I worked the graveyard shift because I was good at convincing myself nothing was wrong. I walked toward the door, boots echoing softly through the cavernous space. The warehouse stretched out on either side of me, active aisles lit in hard white light, pallets stacked with surgical neatness, barcode scanners blinking patiently in their docks. Everything looked exactly as it should. I nudged the door shut with my foot. The latch clicked into place. There, I muttered, mostly to hear my own voice. People forgot things. Day shift rushed, that was all. I turned on my heel and headed deeper into the building, clipboard tucked under my arm. Starting the slow circuit I'd done 100 times before. Inventory checks, door seals, temperature gauges, the kind of work that lulled you into thinking boredom was the biggest danger. The unused section sat at the far end of the warehouse, beyond the last active aisle. No reason to go back there unless something went wrong. The lights were off to save power, leaving the space swallowed in shadow. Even from a distance, it felt different, like the darkness there had weight. I avoided looking at it. That was the first lie I told myself. The second came an hour later, when I saw movement. It happened at the edge of my vision as I scanned a pallet label. A blur, just a suggestion of motion between two tall shelves. I looked up immediately. Nothing. The aisle was empty, perfectly aligned, brightly lit. I laughed under my breath, sharp and humorless. Get some sleep, simple vector cartoon man. Tired expression, dark circles under eyes. Wearing a dark blue security uniform jacket with a generic yellow badge patch, dark work pants, and heavy black boots. Often holding a brown clipboard or a black flashlight. Exhaustion played tricks. Everyone knew that. You saw things. Your brain filled in gaps. I checked my watch and forced myself to keep moving. But the feeling didn't go away. As I walked, I became acutely aware of my own noise. The scuff of my boots, the rustle of my jacket, the faint jingle of keys at my hip. The warehouse answered every sound with an echo, metallic and delayed, like the building was repeating me just to prove it could. I told myself that was normal too. The second time I saw it, I didn't laugh. This time, the movement was slower, a shape sliding back behind a stack of crates in the unused section. Just long enough to register height. With the absence of reflection, my pulse kicked up. I stood very still, clipboard pressed to my chest, listening. The fluorescence hummed. Somewhere far off, a machine cycled with a dull mechanical clank. Nothing else. I took one step toward the dark. Hello, I called. My voice sounded small, swallowed by distance. No answer came back. I should have called security then. That's what the manual said. Any anomaly, any uncertainty, report it. Let someone else handle it. Instead, I walked forward. Each step toward the unused section felt like crossing a boundary I couldn't name. The bright aisles fell away behind me, replaced by shadow and the cold smell of old metal and dust. My flashlight cut a narrow beam ahead, carving shapes out of the gloom shelves, forgotten pallets, shrink wrap hanging like dead skin. I told myself I was being thorough, professional. The silence back there was different, heavier. The hum of the lights didn't reach this far. Every sound I made felt amplified, then distorted by distance. That's when the banging started. It exploded through the warehouse without warning. A violent metallic thud that slammed into the walls and came back doubled, tripled, echoing until I couldn't tell where it had started. I jumped so hard my flashlight skidded across the concrete. My heart roared in my ears loud enough that for a second I didn't hear the second sound. Tap, tap, not random, not chaotic, measured. The tapping came from somewhere behind the shelves, metal striking metal with deliberate spacing. Each tap landed with a pause between, long enough for dread to bloom. My chest tightened. My breathing went shallow and fast. I stood frozen, light trembling in my grip, watching the beam shake across the darkness. "Stop," I whispered, though I didn't know who I was talking to. The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but my heartbeat, sinking instinctively to the rhythm that had just ended. Then something shifted. A footstep, careful, unhurried. It wasn't coming toward me. It was circling. The realization landed cold and clear. Whoever was back there knew the layout, knew where the blind spots were. They weren't lost. They weren't panicking. They were pacing. I backed up slowly, every instinct screaming now, denial finally cracking under the weight of too many coincidences. The flashlight beam caught a smear of grime on the floor, fresh enough to still look damp. A footprint. I turned and ran. The warehouse swallowed me as I sprinted back toward the lit aisles, my footsteps crashing and echoing wildly. Somewhere behind me, another metallic bang rang out, closer this time, followed by the same rhythmic tapping. Faster now, as if in response. I didn't look back. I burst into the main area and nearly collided with a support pillar, my shoulder slamming into cold steel. Pain flared, but I kept moving, fumbling for my radio with numb fingers. "Security," I gasped into it. I need help. There's someone inside." The reply crackled back, calm and distant. "Copy that. Stay where you are.
What the?
Police
Who
are on the
you?
way." Stay where I was. The words felt absurd in a building this big. I pressed myself against a pallet stack, trying to make myself small, listening as the echoes faded. The tapping stopped. The banging didn't return. Silence crept back in, slow and deliberate. Too deliberate. The police arrived minutes later, though it felt like hours. Floodlights snapped on. Voices filled the space, authoritative and grounding. I didn't move until an officer touched my arm gently and asked my name. They found him behind a row of shelves in the unused section, crouched low, clothes layered and filthy, eyes tracking every movement. He didn't fight, didn't speak. Security footage did the rest. They showed it to me later, after my hands stopped shaking. For a week, a man had been walking the perimeter of the warehouse at night, testing doors lingering just out of camera range, timing patrols. The back door I'd noticed wasn't the first one he'd tried, just the one he'd nearly succeeded with. They called him the Pacer. I call him the reason I stopped ignoring that quiet voice in my head, the one that notices the latch that isn't quite right, the shadow that lingers too long, the sound that doesn't belong, because denial isn't bravery. And sometimes the scariest thing isn't being watched. It's realizing how hard you worked to convince yourself you weren't. The water looked wrong. The second my headlights hit it, black and heavy, like spilled oil spread across the road. It didn't splash the way rainwater should. It didn't break or ripple or scatter light. It just slid over the asphalt in a wide, slow sheet, swallowing the yellow center line until it vanished beneath the dark. Rain hammered down hard enough that it felt physical, a constant drumming on the roof and hood, the kind that makes you grip the wheel tighter without realizing it. The smell seeped in through the vents a moment later. Mud, rot, that sour river stink that always reminds me of something old being pulled apart. I eased off the gas and rolled to a stop. For a few seconds, I just sat there, wipers dragging back and forth, trying to decide if I was being dramatic. The flood didn't look violent. No debris rushing past, no current tugging at branches, just water where road should be, stretching farther than my headlights could reach. I checked the time late. Too late to call anyone without sounding stupid. Too late for traffic. Too late for help if something went wrong. "Just back up," I muttered, like saying it out loud would make it easier. I'd driven this road hundreds of times after late shifts. It cut through farmland and low woods, shaved a clean 15 minutes off the highway. At night, it was usually empty in a comforting way, like the world had stepped aside and left me alone with my thoughts. Tonight, it felt empty in a different way, like I'd arrived after everyone else had already left. I shifted into reverse. The parking sensor chirped once, polite and brief. I checked my mirrors automatically. The road behind me stretched out in a narrow tunnel of rain and darkness, the center line smeared into a pale ribbon by the water on the glass. Trees crowded in on both sides, their trunks disappearing into black. No houses, no driveways, no movement. I glanced down to make sure the gear had caught. When I looked back up, the sensor exploded. Beep, beep, beep. My head snapped back against the headrest. A car filled my rearview mirror, so close, it felt like it had materialized inside my back seat. No headlights, no reflection of them on the wet road. Just a low, dark shape pressed into the red wash of my brake lights. I sucked in a breath and froze. It hadn't been there. I knew it hadn't. I just checked. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it had rolled downhill without lights. Maybe I'd missed it in the rain. But none of them fit. There should have been sound. Tires, an engine. Something. I slammed the brake harder, like that might shove reality back where it belonged. The beeping cut off instantly, leaving my ears ringing. My pulse hammered in my neck and temples. I tasted copper and realized I'd clenched my jaw so hard my teeth hurt. "No," I said out loud. The word sounded thin and useless inside the car. I twisted in my seat, craning to see through the back window. Rain warped everything into streaks and shadows. My own face floated back at me in the glass, pale and stretched, eyes too wide to look like mine. The car behind me didn't honk, didn't back up, didn't move at all. I put the car into drive and rolled forward a few feet, away from the flood. My headlights climbed higher up the water's surface, showing more of it. Nothing changed. Behind me, the car rolled forward too, matching me perfectly, keeping the same suffocating distance. The sensor stayed silent now. We were too close for warnings. My hands were slick on the wheel. I wiped one on my jeans without looking, then wrapped both around the rim again. The inside of the car felt smaller, tighter, like the air had thickened. That was when something stepped into the red glow on my left. Then something on my right. Then movement behind the blocking car. Figures peeled out of the darkness, like they'd been standing there the whole time, just waiting for the light. At least 3, maybe 4. It was hard to count when my vision kept snagging on the edges, on the places just beyond where I was looking. They didn't rush, they walked slowly, boots splashing through shallow puddles, shoulders loose, not cautious, not excited, like this was routine. One of them knocked on my passenger window. Knock, knock. The sound went straight through the glass and into my head. I flinched hard enough that the seatbelt dug into my shoulder. My grip tightened until my fingers ached. Another knock followed on my side, harder. "Hey, open it," someone said. "Just crack it, come on," another voice muttered, closer, urgent. "Window," a sharper voice cut in, "window now." They talked over each other, words overlapping and colliding. No script, no clean turn, taking. It felt messy and wrong, like they were improvising, adjusting to me in real time. The man at my passenger window leaned closer. His face hovered inches from the glass, flattened by rain and red light. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He looked bored, like I was an inconvenience. "Door," he said quietly. "Open the door." The car behind me surged forward. The sensor screamed back to life, collapsing into a single solid tone that filled the car. Beep. The sound drilled into my skull. It vibrated through my teeth, my jaw, my chest. It wasn't just noise, it felt like pressure building, like my head was going to split open if it didn't stop. My thoughts scattered, slipping away from me before I could grab onto them. Something bumped my rear bumper. Not hard, just enough to let me know it wasn't an accident, a test. That was the moment something in me broke. Not loudly, not cleanly. It was more like a switch flipping in the dark. I shoved the car into drive and floored it. The front tires plunged into the water, and the sound detonated around me. The flood slammed into the undercarriage like someone dumping shovelfuls of gravel underneath the car. It was deafening. The steering wheel jerked violently, ripping to the side, and I fought it with both hands. Someone shouted. A palm slapped the hood. Another hit the driver's window, hard enough to make the glass flex inward. Water surged up around the doors, cold and heavy. The engine screamed, coughed, screamed again. For a frozen second, I was sure it would die, that I'd stalled myself in the middle of it, that hands would be on the door handles any second. I screamed too. I don't remember deciding to. The tires caught. The car lurched forward, clawing its way up and out of the flood. The sound changed instantly. Water dropping away, pavement roaring beneath me. I shot forward, rain blinding me, branches whipping past in my peripheral vision. Headlights flared behind me, bright, sudden, furious. Then the road curved, and they vanished. I didn't slow down until streetlights bled into view, until the world felt solid again. I pulled into a gas station and sat there shaking, engine running, my whole body buzzing like it had been shocked. When I finally shut the car off, the sudden silence made my ears ring even louder. The dispatcher's voice was calm when I called it in. Mine wasn't. Words spilled out of me in jagged pieces. Flooded road. No headlights. Men surrounding the car. She asked me to repeat things, to slow down. I tried. An officer arrived while I was still sitting there, hands locked together in my lap like they belonged to someone else. He smelled faintly of rain and damp fabric. He listened without interrupting, nodded in the right places, wrote things down. Later, another officer told me the blocking car had been reported stolen earlier that night. Found abandoned a few miles from the flooded stretch. No arrests. No clear suspects. Same spot's been used before, he said. Flood slows people down, makes them hesitate. He didn't say what happened to the ones who didn't get away. He didn't have to. I went home after that and didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the sensor again, that solid, screaming tone. My body jerked awake like I'd been shocked. Dawn came thin and gray, light creeping across the ceiling in slow, cautious lines. I stopped taking that road immediately. Then I stopped trusting empty ones altogether. I took the highway even when it added time, even when it was clogged with trucks and commuters. At least there were witnesses. A week later, I bought a dash cam, front and rear, hardwired. The installer joked about it, said I must have seen something crazy. I laughed because it was easier than explaining. Now, every morning before work, I check the footage from the night before, just a few minutes, just enough to see the darkness behind me stay empty. Sometimes sitting at a red light late at night, I feel my foot tense on the brake for no reason. I check the mirror, nothing there. Then I check again, just to be sure. I don't know what I think I'll find one day. I just know I never want to look down again and look up to find something already there. My mouth went dry. Every instinct I had screamed at once. A full body alarm. I dropped the curtain and backed away from the window, my pulse roaring in my ears, so loudly it felt like it might give me away. I didn't think. I moved. I lunged for the driver's seat, my bare feet slapping against the vinyl floor, the RV rocking slightly with the sudden shift of weight. My hand fumbled for the keys hanging from the ignition, fingers clumsy and slick with sweat. "Hey," the man outside said, his tone changing sharper now, edged with urgency. "Wait, you don't need to." I turned the key. The engine coughed, then caught, the sound explosively loud in the clearing. At the same moment, I flipped on the headlights. The darkness shattered. White light flooded the clearing, slicing through the trees and exposing everything the night had been hiding. The men, there were 4 of them, maybe 5, were mid-stride, hands already reaching. Faces twisted in expressions I didn't have time to fully process. Surprise, yes, but not confusion, not fear. Recognition. The man at the door stepped back, his friendly mask gone in an instant, mouth tightening as he raised an arm to shield his eyes. I slammed the RV into gear and hit the gas. The RV lurched forward, tires spinning on loose gravel before catching. One of the men stumbled back into the trees. Another slapped a hand against the side of the vehicle as I roared past, the impact reverberating through the frame like a punch. I didn't look back. The road was barely a road, more suggestion than structure, and I took it far too fast, branches scraping along the sides, something hard striking the undercarriage with a metallic shriek. My hands shook on the wheel, my breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts that left my chest aching. In the rearview mirror, the clearing vanished, swallowed whole by the dark. I drove for a long time before I slowed down, long enough that my legs started to tremble, long enough that the adrenaline burned itself out and left only a hollow, buzzing exhaustion in its wake. When I finally pulled over, this time near a bend where the trees thinned and the sky opened up, I locked the doors and sat there, forehead resting against the steering wheel, shaking. I told myself it was over. That was the second mistake. Because once the immediate terror faded, something else crept in to take its place. A slow, corrosive doubt. I replayed the scene again and again in my head, scrutinizing every detail like evidence in a trial. What if I'd imagined the others? What if the darkness had played tricks on my eyes? My fear filling in gaps that weren't really there. The man had asked for water. People broke down out there all the time. Alaska was unforgiving like that. But no matter how many times I tried to rationalize it, one image refused to loosen its grip on my mind. The way those hands had already been reaching when the headlights came on. Not startled, not defensive, expectant. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I drove until dawn bled pale gray into the sky, until I found a gas station with lights on, and people moving inside like normalcy itself was a tangible thing. I parked under the brightest lamp and sat there until my hands stopped shaking. I told no one. Not the cashier who asked if I was okay, not the couple fueling up beside me, laughing about something mundane and unimportant. The words felt too fragile, too easily dismissed. And that scared me almost as much as the men in the clearing, because if I couldn't make someone else believe it, then what proof did I have that it had really happened? I continued my trip, but something fundamental had shifted. Every pullout looked like a potential trap. Every knock, real or imagined, sent a spike of fear straight through my chest. I kept the lights off at night, the keys within reach, the engine primed in my mind for a fast escape. Weeks later, when I was thousands of miles away and the landscape had softened into something familiar and safe, I woke from a dead sleep to the sound of 3 soft knocks echoing in my head. Even now, when I think about that night, what unsettles me most isn't the men themselves. It's the precision, the patience, the certainty that I would open the door. Sometimes, in the quiet moments just before sleep, I picture the clearing again, not as it was revealed by the headlights, but as it must have looked just before. Dark still, waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, miles from any road, they're still standing in the trees, listening for the sound of an engine pulling in, rehearsing their lines, ready for the next knock at exactly 2 o'clock m.a.m. The knock came exactly at 2 o'clock m.a.m., soft enough to sound polite, precise enough to feel rehearsed. I was lying on my side in the narrow bed of the RV, wrapped in a sleeping bag that still smelled faintly of detergent and pine sap, listening to the low tick of the heater, cycling on and off. Outside, Alaska pressed against the thin aluminum walls in every direction. Black, silent, immense, the kind of silence that isn't empty but loaded, humming just under the threshold of hearing, like the land itself was holding its breath. I hadn't planned to stop there. That was the first mistake. I told myself I would push another hour, find a proper pullout closer to the highway, somewhere with a signal. But the road had narrowed, then disappeared into a rutted track, and the fatigue crept up fast, thick, and dangerous. When I saw the clearing, a rough oval scraped out of the trees, no fire ring, no trash, no tire tracks fresh enough to read. I took it as a sign. Solitude, I thought. Safety. Now, in the dim yellow glow of the RV's interior lights, that thought felt embarrassingly naive. The knock came again. 3 soft taps. Knuckles on fiberglass. "Hello?" A man's voice called, close enough that I could hear his breath fogging the air. "Sorry to bother you. I'm in a bit of trouble out here." I didn't answer. I stayed very still, my hand frozen on the zipper of the sleeping bag, heart already accelerating as if it knew something I didn't want to admit yet. The heater clicked off. The sudden absence of its hum made the silence outside feel louder, more intentional. I slid my phone off the mattress and checked the screen. No service. I already knew that, but seeing the empty bars again tightened something in my chest. I glanced at the clock. 2 o'clock m.a.m. exactly. Not 1:58 a.m., not 2:03 a.m. exactly. "Ma'am," the man said, "I just need some water. My truck broke down a mile back. I've been walking for hours." His tone was careful, friendly, not rushed. That alone set my nerves on edge. People who are genuinely desperate don't sound like that. They rush their words, they overshare, they beg. I eased myself upright and reached for the small curtain separating the bed from the front of the RV. The interior was warm, amber lit, almost cozy. Throw blanket draped over the passenger seat. A mug I'd forgotten to wash sitting in the sink. My boots kicked off by the door. It looked like a life, like proof that someone lived here, even temporarily. Outside was another world entirely. I pinched the curtain between my fingers and pulled it back just enough to peer through the narrow side window. At first, I saw nothing but darkness and the faint suggestion of trees. Then my eyes adjusted. A man stood just outside the RV door. He was close, too close. I could make out the shape of his shoulders, the brim of a hat pulled low, the pale oval of his face floating in the dark. He held his hands up, palms visible, as if he'd rehearsed that too. "See," he said softly. "Just me. I'm not armed. I'm not trying to scare you." My stomach dropped. I hadn't said anything about being scared. "I don't have much," I called back, keeping my voice steady, louder than I felt. "I can crack a window and pass you a bottle." There was a pause, long enough to feel deliberate. "That'd be great," he said. "But the window's kind of high, isn't it? Might spill. Why don't you just open the door a bit?" Another small mistake, caught just in time. I traveled alone long enough to recognize the rhythm of a setup. Step by step, reasonable requests, that edged closer and closer to the one thing you couldn't take back. "I'm not opening the door," I said. He sighed, the sound carrying clearly through the thin wall. "I get it. You're nervous. Anyone would be. But I promise you, I'm just thirsty." As he spoke, my gaze drifted past him, deeper into the clearing. The darkness there felt different, layered, textured. I leaned closer to the glass, angling my head to cut the glare from inside. That's when I saw them. At first, it was just movement. A shift, a shadow separating itself from another shadow. Then another, and another, shapes resolving into the suggestion of shoulders, legs, the faint gleam of eyes catching what little starlight filtered through the trees. They weren't standing still. They were already moving, slowly, quietly, angling in, not toward the door, but toward the front of the RV, toward me. The man outside the door kept talking, his voice a steady, soothing drone. "You don't have to be afraid. We're all just trying to get through the night." They were split and swollen, the skin torn raw in places, deep purple bruises blooming beneath the surface. Dried blood crusted the creases, dark and uneven, like he'd washed them, but not well enough, not recently enough. He curled his fingers slowly, deliberately, as if testing them. "Please," I heard myself say, the word thin and useless. "If you're hurt, I can." His pacing resumed, faster now. The line he followed tightened, bringing him closer to the counter with each pass. The puddle crept outward, lapping at the base of the shelves. My thoughts scattered. Images flickered uninvited, headlines, crime shows, warnings I'd half listened to my entire life. Trust your gut, don't be polite, don't freeze. But freezing was exactly what I did. The phone sat inches from my knee, hidden just out of his line of sight. I imagined lifting the receiver, dialing, speaking, but the fantasy collapsed under the weight of his gaze. I knew, with a certainty that felt carved into bone, that he'd hear it, that he'd know. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, the sound tunneling into my head. Every drip from his coat landed like a countdown. "I just work here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't want any trouble." He stopped again. This time when he turned to look at me, his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Something closer to recognition. The storm outside roared, thunder cracking so close the windows rattled. For a split second, the glass reflected the inside of the store back at us. And in that reflection, his eyes looked black, empty, like holes punched clean through him. My hand twitched toward the phone. His head snapped in my direction. "Don't," he said again, sharper. This time I felt something inside me give way. The minutes that followed stretched into something elastic and unreal. He paced. I stood. The lights flickered intermittently, each buzz louder than the last. The smell in the room shifted, metallic now, layered over damp fabric and old oil. I started to notice details I wished I hadn't. The way his shoulders rose and fell out of sync with his breathing, the faint tremor in his left hand, the way his gaze drifted occasionally, unfocused, as if he were listening to something I couldn't hear. At one point, I realized I couldn't feel my feet. The bell above the door rang suddenly as it swung open. I flinched so hard my vision blurred. But it was just the wind. Rain lashed the entrance, driven sideways by the storm. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might leave it open, might invite whatever was out there inside. But he didn't. He stood still, facing the door, his back to me. This was it, I thought. This was my chance. I reached for the phone. The receiver lifted a fraction of an inch. He spoke without turning around. I said don't. My hand locked midair. Slowly, painfully, I lowered the phone back into place. He turned to face me one last time. Up close, I could see the fine spray of rain still clinging to his eyelashes. I noticed then that his pupils were uneven, one slightly larger than the other. The detail lodged itself in my mind, sharp and unforgettable. Then he walked past me, so close I could smell him fully now. Wet earth, sweat, something sour beneath it all. His shoulder brushed mine, the contact light but deliberate. My skin crawled in its wake. The door opened, the bell rang. Cold air rushed in again, carrying him with it. And then he was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. I don't remember locking the door. I don't remember calling my manager or the police. or anyone at all. I remember sitting on the floor behind the counter, with my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the expanding dark stain on the tile where he'd stood. The puddle didn't evaporate by morning, neither did the feeling that something had brushed past me and chosen not to take me along. When my shift ended, the sky was pale and washed out, the storm reduced to a fine mist. I drove home with the radio off, every muscle tight, replaying the night in relentless loops. His voice, his hands, the way he'd known sleep didn't come. The report came on the local news that afternoon. A woman missing from a nearby town. Last seen walking home. Description vague, details scarce. The photo was grainy, poorly lit, but the background told me everything I needed to know. Rain-slicked pavement, yellow streetlight glare, darkness pressing in from all sides. I turned off the television and sat in silence, the hum of my refrigerator suddenly unbearable. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the drip of water hitting tile. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I dialed anyway, and sometimes worse than anything else, I wonder if he knew, standing there under those flickering lights, that he didn't need to hurt me, because he already had. The first thing I noticed was the sound of water hitting the floor. Slow, deliberate drips that didn't match the violence of the storm outside. Like the building itself had started to bleed. It was just after midnight, the hour when the world feels temporarily abandoned, when even the highway loses confidence in itself. The gas station sat alone at the edge of Route 19, a low concrete rectangle surrounded by wet asphalt and darkness. The rain had been falling since dusk, heavy and relentless, blurring the sodium lights into long yellow smears. Every few minutes, thunder rolled so deep, it felt less like noise and more like pressure. Something pushing against my chest from the inside. I stood behind the counter, with my arms folded tight, listening to the fluorescent lights hum overhead. They always hummed. Every overnight clerk learns to live with it. But tonight the sound felt louder, almost impatient, like it was waiting for something to happen. I'd been alone since 10. No cars, no trucks. Not even the usual lost college kid, stopping for energy drinks in bad directions. Just the rain, the buzzing lights, and the faint smell of burnt coffee, clinging to the air no matter how many times I dumped the pot. I remember thinking, clearly, stupidly, that the night felt too empty. That was when the door opened. The bell above it gave its usual dull clang, but the sound landed wrong, stretched thin by the storm howling outside. Cold air rushed in, sharp and wet, carrying the smell of rain, soaked pavement and something darker beneath it. Mud, iron, old water. He stood just inside the threshold, not stepping fully in, as if unsure whether the floor would hold his weight. The man was drenched, not the normal kind of soaked you see when someone runs from their car, but saturated, as if he'd been standing out there for a long time, letting the rain work on him. Water poured from his hair in steady lines, ran down the collar of his jacket, dripped from his sleeves and fingertips. Each drop hit the tile with a soft, hollow tap. I waited for him to speak. He didn't. "Hey," I said automatically, the word shaped by muscle memory more than thought. "You can come in." He did then. One step forward, then another, slow, careful, like he was counting the distance. His shoes left dark, spreading footprints behind him. Within seconds, a puddle had formed at his feet, wide and glossy, reflecting the buzzing lights above in broken shards. He stopped 3 paces from the counter and stared not at the shelves, not at the drinks cooler humming behind me at me. His face was unremarkable in a way that felt intentional. Mid-30s, maybe, brown hair plastered to his head. A day's worth of stubble. Nothing about him stood out enough to anchor my thoughts, and that was what unsettled me most. My eyes kept sliding off him, unable to settle on a single defining feature, except his eyes. They were open too wide, not bulging, just held. As if he'd forgotten how blinking worked, or decided it was unnecessary. They didn't track the room, or flick to the counter, or glance at the exit. They locked onto me and stayed there, unbroken. The hum of the lights seemed to rise. "You okay?" I asked. "Storm's pretty bad." He didn't answer. I told myself it was shock. People came in like this sometimes. Wrecks, breakups, long drives gone wrong. Silence wasn't unusual, but the longer he stood there, dripping onto the floor, the more the quiet thickened, pressing in around us. "Sir," I said firmer, If you need something, you can. He moved, not toward the counter, not away from it. He turned sideways and began to walk, back and forth, 3 steps toward the drinks cooler. Pause, 3 steps back toward the door. Pause, over and over, following an invisible line across the tile. His movements were wrong, too smooth in places, jerky in others, like frames missing from a film reel. His arms hung stiff at his sides, fingers curled slightly inward. He still hadn't blinked. The puddle beneath him grew, spreading faster than it should have. The water ran dark, tinged with something that didn't look like rain. I swallowed. My mouth felt dry despite the damp chill creeping into the room. "Sir," I tried again. "You can't." He stopped, slowly, deliberately. His head turned until his eyes found me again. The lights flickered. Just once, but long enough to make my heart stutter. When they steadied, the man was still there, staring, the silence stretched taut between us. I felt suddenly aware of the distance to the phone under the counter. How close it was, how far. "I'm going to need you too," I started. "Don't." The word cut clean through the air. His voice was low, rough, unused, like it had been sitting dormant in his throat for a long time. I froze. The hum of the lights surged, vibrating against my skull. My fingers dug into the laminate counter without me realizing it. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to step back, to grab the phone, to do something. But my body refused to cooperate. He lifted his hands. That was when I saw his knuckles. I've camped most of my life. Oregon, Washington, the Cascades, Mason. But nothing prepared me for what happened last winter. Nothing. Even now, I still catch myself listening for echoes that shouldn't exist. It was me, Stephen, his fiancée Haley, and our other buddy Aaron. We returned to this high-altitude site we'd used a few times before, around 5,500 feet up, tucked between ancient evergreens that looked like sleeping giants under their heavy coats of snow. Problem was, the trail markers? Gone. Completely swallowed by a deep, fresh powder that didn't look stepped in for days. My friends acted like the cold gave them immunity from basic decency, snapping frost-crusted branches just to hear them crack, chucking empty beer cans into drifts, like they'd melt away with spring, yelling every dumb joke that came to their minds. Their laughter echoed weirdly, like the trees didn't want to give the sound back. I felt embarrassed, angry even. I knew better. Wilderness earns respect or takes it. So I bailed early, zipped into my sleeping bag, and tried to pretend the wind wasn't judging all of us. Sometime after midnight, the whole forest went dead quiet. Deep snow quiet. The kind that feels like you're underwater. I slipped out to pee, jaw clenched against the kind of cold that burns first and aches second. The sky was clear, the moon a thin silver cutout hanging above the ridge. And then, those eyes. 2 reflective white pinpoints hovering at the edge of the trees, just beyond where the moonlight touched the snow. I jerked so hard I nearly fell backward. My light wasn't even out yet, but the eyes shifted, drifting a foot closer like they'd been waiting for me. I fumbled for my flashlight, breath fogging. When the beam hit the figure, I nearly dropped it. It was Haley. Same parka, same fur-lined hood, same small frame. But she was wrong. She stood 30, maybe 40 feet away in the clearing. Snow around her was untouched, so perfectly smooth it looked like someone had poured white paint around her boots. Except she wasn't really standing. She was too stiff, her arms slightly away from her sides, her posture impossible, like she was being held up by thick strings. Snow-blanketed wilderness in the Pacific Northwest. Ancient evergreens, looming under heavy coats of snow. Slow pan across the campsite. Tents, nestled between sleeping giant trees. Snow deep and untouched, except for a few footprints. Protagonist, zipping up a heavy parka, face flushed with cold, eyes scanning the silent forest. Stephen, Haley, and Aaron laughing raucously, snapping frost-crusted branches, tossing empty beer cans into snowdrifts. Beer cans half buried in the snow, branches splintering with sharp cracks, echoing oddly in the quiet woods. Friends yelling jokes, their laughter bouncing off the trees, the sound strangely muted and distorted. Mason's uneasy expression glancing at the others, feeling embarrassed and angry. Mason, hands clenching sleeping bag zipper, slipping away from the group toward their tent. Mason, crawling into sleeping bag, pulling it tight, shutting out the sounds of friends and wind. Time lapse of moon rising above the ridge, casting silver light over the snowy campsite. Tents huddled together, fire dying down, wind rustling through the branches, frost forming on tent fabric. Mason, breath fogging in the cold air inside the tent. Mason's eyes open in the darkness, listening to the unnatural silence. Forest at midnight, everything still. Snow muffling all sound. Mason, slipping out of tent, boots crunching on snow, jaw clenched against the cold. Mason, walking away from tent, moonlight illuminating the clearing. Moon as a thin silver cutout above the ridge, stars glittering in the clear sky. Mason, standing alone, exhaling visible breath, scanning the tree line. Two reflective white pinpoints, eyes, hovering at the edge of the trees. Mason, jerking in surprise, nearly falling backward, fumbling for flashlight. Eyes shifting closer, drifting just beyond the reach of moonlight. Mason, trembling hands pulling out flashlight, breath fogging. Flashlight beam sweeps across the snow, illuminating a figure in the clearing. Haley's familiar parka and fur-lined hood, standing impossibly stiff in untouched snow. Snow around her boots perfectly smooth, no footprints, no disturbance. Haley's arms held slightly away from her sides, posture unnatural, like a marionette. Mason, whispering, voice cracking. Haley, what are you doing out here? Everything frozen. Haley, trees, wind. Mason, Haley's face, blank, eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. Mason, exact voice and tone. Mason, horrified reaction, blood freezing, backing away slowly, boots crunching on snow, each step echoing like a gunshot. The figure tilting its head to match Mason movement. Haley's body gliding forward, no footsteps, no sinking into snow. Mason panicking, bolting for Stephen's tent. Mason pounding on frozen tent canvas, knuckles bruising. Stephen groaning, unzipping tent flap, warmth spilling out. Stephen pulling tent flap open, confusion and irritation on his face. Mason swinging flashlight into tent, revealing the real Haley inside. Haley's messy hair, sleep puffy face, blinking in confusion. Mason, stunned expression, stomach dropping. Mason, turning back toward the clearing, flashlight trembling. Empty clearing, smooth, untouched snow, no footprints, no eyes. Heavy, suffocating silence in the forest. Moonlight on undisturbed snow. Mason, dragging sleeping bag next to dying fire, feeding flames with numb fingers. Fire flickering, snow falling from branches, every sound amplified in the silence. Mason, exhausted face, eyes darting at every creak and thud. Campsite at dawn, pale light creeping over the horizon. Mason, sitting by the fire, not sleeping, staring into the woods. Mason's ears straining, listening for unnatural sounds. Deep in the trees, something mimicked Mason's voice. Haley, what are you doing out here? Forest answering with absolute silence, trees looming, snow untouched. Mason's haunted eyes, dawn breaking, forest still holding its secrets. I still don't know why we chose late fall for a 4-night trip on the Carolina border. Everything up there freezes early, far colder than you'd expect that far south. And the mountains have a way of squeezing sound down into nothing. But we were stubborn. We wanted solitude. We wanted that real camping experience. We got more than we asked for. The river that ran past our campsite barely reached our ankles, but God, it was cold. So cold that touching it burned. The banks were steep, the woods brittle with rime ice, patches of old snow clinging to the shadows like something that refused to die. Frost covered everything, our tents, our packs, the stones around the fire ring, and yeah, we broke the buddy system. Worst mistake of the trip. 3 of my friends, Marcus, Ryan, and Leo, drove off to grab more firewood and explore a trail, leaving me, Ethan, alone at camp with nothing but the cold and a pot of cheesy grits. The silence was absolute, not peaceful, predatory. Later I decided to fish the shallow sections downstream. I figured I'd warm up by moving around. I caught a sad little bass with numb fingers and sat on a rock in the slow rapids, letting the cold seep through my boots. The forest around me felt frozen in mid-breath. That's when I felt it. The hairs on the back of my neck lifted all at once, like someone had brushed a fingertip along the back of my hoodie. Then, a sharp crack of a twig on the steep, icy bank to my right. I spun around. Nothing but frost, shadows, and branches bowing under their own weight. I tried to calm myself. Until I looked down, my legs were crawling with tiny, stiff leeches. The cold must have slowed them because they clung to me like good, brittle black twigs. I panicked, ripping them off in a blind frenzy. I tripped, smashed my foot against a frozen cypress knee, and limped at a full sprint back toward camp, with my heart slamming against my ribs. By the time the others returned, the sun was low, bleeding orange light through the bare trees. I was still shaken, still embarrassed. When we walked back into the clearing, that's when we saw him. A man was standing in the river, water up to his shins, freezing water. And he stood there as if it meant nothing, talking casually with my friends. He looked like some old-world survivalist, a canvas coat hardened with mud, boots crusted with ice, beard stiff with frost, hair matted beneath a wool cap. His posture was unnaturally still, like he wasn't cold, like he didn't feel anything. "Evening," he said. His voice was flat and calm. "Name's Bo." He claimed he owned the region, whatever that meant. Said his family had lived in these mountains long before the roads came in. The way he said it twisted something in my stomach, like he was politely reminding us we didn't belong. Then he looked directly at me. "You," he said, nodding toward the river behind me. "I saw you down yonder earlier." My throat went dry. He squinted as if replaying the scene in his head. "I was about to come talk to you," he added casually, till you spooked and ran off." My friends laughed awkwardly, like this was normal. But all I could think about was the timing. When I'd been alone. When I'd stripped layers to check for leeches. When I thought I'd heard something or someone in the trees. Bo had been watching me the whole time, close enough to see everything. We eventually convinced him to leave, forced politeness, careful nods, promises that we'd stay respectful. He finally walked upstream, humming a thin, tuneless melody as he disappeared into the trees. None of us believed he was really gone. Night fell fast in those mountains, and colder. We took turns staying awake beside the fire, staring into the pitch-black tree line as the flames shrank lower and lower. Every shift of frost, every snap of a frozen branch, every sweep of cold wind through camp felt like a footstep. And every few hours across the river in the darkness, one of us would hear it. A soft splash in shallow water, a low, rhythmic breathing, the distinct crunch of a single boot on frozen leaves, or worse, the distant, bone-splitting shriek of an owl echoing like something being strangled. By the final night, none of us were sleeping. None of us were talking. The cold had become another enemy waiting with the forest, pressing in, watching. And somewhere out there, hidden in that silence, Bo was still watching us back. I love skiing, but what I love even more is the quiet afterward. That moment when you peel off the gear, sink into a warm cabin, and leave the cold outside where it belongs. That's why I rented a secluded A-frame cabin about 20 minutes away from one of Colorado's luxury ski resorts, tucked deep between pine trees heavy with fresh snow. That night had been perfect. A long run, sore legs, hot stew, a fireplace crackling beside me. Every winter cliché except it felt earned. Outside the snow was deep, untouched, so thick that every footstep sounded like someone punching into styrofoam, which is why the footsteps made my blood go cold. Crunch, crunch. Heavy footsteps moving toward the cabin, slow, steady, deliberate. No other sound in the valley, just that. I froze on the couch, the fire popping behind me. They just stopped, right at my door. Then came a knock, soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. I cracked the door open, and there he was. His gloved hand slapped flat against it. I slammed the door shut, locked it. Then I heard it. Footsteps, crunching away through the deep snow. And then I saw him, like he knew. Eventually, I'd fall asleep. I've done a lot of backcountry camping, long enough to know the difference between creepy and dangerous. But this trip, this one messed with me in a way I can't shake. It was early January and three of us, me, my buddy Reed, and his cousin Mark, headed into the Appalachian foothills for what we thought would be a quiet winter weekend. Light snow, crisp air, that kind of muffled silence you only get when the cold presses down on everything. We figured we'd have the entire primitive loop to ourselves. Wrong. The campground wasn't empty at all. It was a long, frozen dirt road with a dozen scattered sites, each dusted with thin snow, tire ruts hardened into icy grooves. And parked at the site, directly across from ours, maybe 30-40 feet away, was this beat-up old Outback. Snow piled high on the windshield, and sitting outside it, in a camping chair half buried in frost, was a man in a heavy parka. No fire, no food out, not even a tent pitched, just him, watching us. At first I told myself he was probably just lonely or weird or cold enough to have shut down emotionally. Happens. Winter does strange things to people, but then I noticed the details, tiny, stupid details I should have paid more attention to, like how he never blinked when he stared at us, or how he had a long, black machete strapped to his hip, resting against that white, snowy backdrop like some kind of warning. We tried to ignore him, we really did. Set up our tent, gathered wood, fumbled with frozen straps and numb fingers. I made some jokes. Reed cracked a beer. Mark pretended not to notice the guy staring holes through us. But you can only pretend so long before your nerves start crawling. The second day we spent almost entirely collecting firewood. Everything was soaked, stiff with frost, heavy as sin. Every step crunched loudly in the fresh powder. It was dead quiet except for that. Quiet enough that we could hear him clear his throat across the way. Quiet enough that we noticed whenever he stood, whenever he shifted, whenever he scraped something metal against metal. Late afternoon, everything exploded. A convoy of 5 SUVs barreled down the frozen dirt road, sliding a little on the ice. A big millennial friend group, I guess. City people who thought camping meant cranking Bluetooth speakers and ignoring "Dare leave no trace." They were obnoxiously loud from the second they opened their doors, slamming trunks, laughing, shouting over each other, stomping all through the snow like it owed them something. And the man changed. His entire body tightened. His jaw clenched so hard I genuinely thought I heard it grind. His breath came out in fast white bursts. His hand hovered near that machete like it weighed almost nothing. I don't think I've ever hated a loud group of strangers more in my life. Not because of the noise, but because I could feel his attention shifting, sharpening, focusing on them the way a starving dog watches a steak. That night, none of us slept well. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Every snap of ice sounded like metal being drawn. My mind kept racing with all the ways we'd screwed up, choosing a site too close to him, ignoring the red flags, assuming we were the main characters in our own little camping weekend instead of prey sharing a clearing with a predator. Before dawn, I woke to the sound of Reed messing with the fire pit, trying to get some warmth going before the sun came up. I unzipped the tent, breath fogging so sharply it hurt, and that's when I saw him. The man was standing directly behind Reed, just standing there, silent, still, his coat dusted with snow, his boots making no sound at all on the frozen ground, his hand resting on the machete like it was simply part of him. And Reed, poor Reed, didn't even realize he wasn't alone until the man spoke. "Which one of you," he said softly, almost gently, "was doing that dumbass voice last night?" Reed froze. I froze. Even the air seemed to freeze. That was me," Reed stammered. The man broke into the strangest laugh I've ever heard, like a cough crossed with a bark. The first thing I noticed was how quiet the snow made everything. Not peaceful, muted. Like the world had been wrapped in cotton so screams wouldn't carry. That's what I understood later. At the time, I was 17, standing in my parents' kitchen with a paper plate, bending under too much food, trying to laugh at something my uncle said, while the house vibrated with Christmas noise. The living room was packed, coats draped over chairs, boots piled by the door. The air smelled like pine sugar and burned gravy. It was supposed to feel safe. Then my cousin brought him in. "This is Dave," she announced, bright and loud, like she was daring someone to object. Dave stood half a step behind her. He was too old to be here in the way a wrong note is too loud. Mid-30s, maybe older. Thick neck, clean haircut that tried very hard to look respectable. His smile was wide and practiced, like he'd rehearsed it alone. His eyes didn't smile. They slid past everyone else in the room and landed on me. I remember the exact second it happened because my stomach dropped before my brain caught up. "Oh," he said, tilting his head. "You didn't tell me you had a daughter this pretty." My mom laughed automatically. The reflex laugh people use to smooth things over. "I didn't. She's 17, my cousin said quickly, like she was proud of it. "Basically grown." Dave's smile stretched. "Yeah," he said. "I can tell. From that point on, I couldn't move anywhere in the house without him appearing nearby. If I went to refill my drink, he was at the counter. If I tried to help my aunt in the kitchen, he leaned against the doorway. He never touched me. Not technically, but he stood close enough that I could smell his cologne over the food. College soon. Got a boyfriend? You look older than 17? That's a compliment." Every time I tried to step away, he softened his voice, widened his smile, like I was the one being rude. Once, when I slipped into the hallway just to breathe, he followed. "You're quiet," he said gently. "I like that. Means you notice things." "I need to get back," I muttered. He leaned down slightly. "You don't have to be nervous. I'm family now." That's when my aunt passed us and smiled. "Dave's so sweet, isn't he?" she said to me. Dave turned to her instantly. The change was flawless. His shoulders relaxed. His eyes crinkled. He looked harmless. I stood there feeling heat crawl up my neck, wondering if I was imagining things. If I was the only one seeing something wrong. If maybe I was being dramatic. By the time the party wound down, I felt hollow. Snow was falling harder now. Thick, flake-swallowing sound. Cars pulled away slowly. Doors shut, laughter faded. My cousin and Dave left around midnight. I watched from the window as he paused outside, scanning the house. Then he looked toward the back, toward my room. My bedroom was on the first floor, facing the yard. I locked my door before bed. Then I checked it again. I lay there listening to the heat click on and off, the house settling, the quiet pressing in. That's when I heard it. Tap. Soft. Almost polite. I didn't move. Tap. Tap. It was coming from my window. I slid out of bed and pulled the curtain back an inch. Dave stood in the snow, so close his breath fogged the glass. No jacket, no hat. His shoes were already soaked through. He smiled when he saw me. "There you are," he said softly. "You forgot to say goodbye." My throat tightened. "I drove all the way back just to see you," he added. "That's not rude, is it?" I shook my head and stepped back. "Open the window," he said. "It's freezing out here." Number, his smile twitched. "I just want to talk," he said. "Don't be like that." I didn't move. His face changed, not into rage, into emptiness. The corners of his eyes stopped crinkling. His mouth hung slack, like the smile had been removed instead of dropped. He looked at me the way someone looks at a locked door, an object in his way. "Open it," he said. "Don't be a brat," I screamed. The sound felt wrong in the snow-heavy air, swallowed before it could travel. Dave's hands slammed against the glass crack. One pane shattered inward. Freezing air rushed across my face, sharp and biting, carrying the smell of snow and metal. His fingers pushed through the broken glass, reaching for the latch. I heard my parents' door slam open, footsteps, shouting. The latch began to lift. My dad burst into my room and tackled Dave backward through the window frame, dragging him into the yard and driving him face first into the snow. Police lights filled the yard minutes later. They found knives in his pockets, fake IDs in his wallet, a bag in his car with my name written on a piece of paper. I didn't sleep that night. When it snows now, I keep my curtains closed because quiet doesn't mean safe. Sometimes it just means someone is close enough not to make a sound. The worst monsters don't hide under beds. They hide in plain sight, wearing 499 badges and drinking bad office coffee. I was 24, working as a junior analyst at a mid-sized firm in the city. It was a gray, carpeted purgatory of cubicles and fluorescent lights that hummed loud enough to give you a migraine. The only bright spot was the annual Secret Santa. I pulled the name of a guy in accounting, bought a mug, and forgot about it. That same week, Evan started. He introduced himself as a contractor, helping with the end-of-year rush. He was utterly average, mid-30s, khakis, blue button-down, and a generic lanyard. He was the kind of guy your eyes slide right over, but he was always around. If I was at the copier, he was filing papers nearby. If I was in the break room, he was washing a spoon. He never spoke much. He just watched. The gifts started appearing on my desk a few days later. The first was a small bag of chocolates. "For the sugar crash," the note said. Harmless, the second gift appeared 2 days later. I came back from lunch to find a pair of leather gloves on my keyboard. "Your hands looked cold this morning," the note read. I felt a prickle of unease. I hadn't realized anyone was watching me walk in. The third gift wasn't on my desk. It was a Friday, and I'd stayed late to finish a report. The office was empty, the lights dimmed to that eerie emergency. Mode gloom. When I got to my car in the parking garage, there was a red envelope taped to the driver's side window. Inside was a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, sitting at my desk, taken from behind the row of filing cabinets. The timestamp was from that morning. "You work too hard," the back of the photo said. "Let me take care of you." My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't Secret Santa. This was a hunt. I drove home checking my rearview mirror every 10 seconds. I double-locked my apartment door and threw the chain on. I told myself I'd go to HR first thing Monday. I was making tea, trying to calm my shaking hands, when I found the USB drive. It had been slipped into my purse, deep in the side pocket where I keep my keys. I shouldn't have plugged it in, but I did. There was only one video file. I clicked play. The footage wasn't of the office. It was grainy, shot from outside a window at night, looking through slats of blinds. It took me a second to recognize my own living room. I saw myself on the couch watching television. I saw myself stand up and stretch. Then the camera zoomed in. Not on me, on the digital clock by my television. 7:42 p.m. I looked at the clock on my wall. It was 7:45 p.m. The video was from 3 minutes ago. He wasn't just watching, he was here. Knock, knock, knock. The sound hit the heavy wood of my front door like a gunshot. "Rachel?" A voice called. It was muffled, breathless. "Rachel, it's Evan from work. Please, I need help." I stood frozen in the kitchen, the kettle whistling low on the stove. I was walking past your building," he stammered. "I got jumped. They took my phone, my wallet. I'm bleeding. Please, just let me use your phone." It was a perfect performance. The panic in his voice sounded so real. If I hadn't seen the video, if I hadn't found the photo, I might have opened the door. "I'm calling the police for you," I shouted, my voice trembling. "Stay there." The silence that followed was heavy. Then the tone changed. "Don't be difficult, Rachel," he said. His voice wasn't panicked anymore. It was flat, cold. "I know you're in there. I saw you make tea." Then came a sound worse than the knocking, the slow, metallic scratch of a lock being picked. I backed up, grabbing the first thing my hand touched. The kettle of boiling water I'd just taken off the burner. The deadbolt clicked. The knob turned slowly. The door opened just a crack, stopped by the security chain. Through the gap, I saw one blue eye staring at me. He smiled. "Found you." Then he threw his shoulder against the door. The chain snapped out of the wood with a sickening crunch. Evan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He wasn't bleeding, he looked excited. "You weren't supposed to run," he whispered, stepping toward me. I didn't think. I didn't scream. I just swung the kettle. I threw the boiling water straight into his face. He shrieked. A guttural, animal sound, and clawed at his eyes, stumbling back. Steam rose from his skin. I didn't wait to see the damage. I bolted past him, slipping on the wet floor, and tore out into the hallway, screaming for my neighbors. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They found the picked lock. They found the USB drive. But when they contacted my company, HR was confused. "We don't have an Evan," the manager said. "And we don't hire contractors." Security footage revealed he'd been entering the building for weeks using a badge stolen from an employee who had been fired 3 years ago. He just walked in. Saturday at an empty desk and picked a target. I quit 2 days later. I moved apartments. But sometimes when I'm the last one left in the office, or when I hear a knock at my door after dark, I can still smell the steam, and I wonder whose name he pulled next. The only reason I bought the camera was for the dog. I was 28, living in a third-floor apartment in Chicago. My name is Jessica. It was a secure building, key fob entry, cameras in the lobby, heavy fire doors. It felt safe, but my golden retriever, Cooper, had separation anxiety, so I bought one of those little cube cameras that links to your phone. It had night vision and two-way audio, so I could talk to him while I was at work. It was New Year's Eve. I decided to stay in. My friends were going to a crowded club downtown, but I was exhausted from end-of-year audits. I wanted wine, a frozen pizza, and my couch. By 11 o'clock p.m., the fireworks had started. The pops and bangs were distant, muffled by the winter wind, but Cooper hated them. He was pacing the apartment whining. To distract him, I filled his Kong toy with peanut butter and put it in the bedroom, the quietest room in the house. I shut the door so he could have some peace, leaving him in there with his bed and the camera. I went back to the living room, poured a glass of Merlot, and turned on the television to watch the ball drop. At 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Motion detected. Bedroom camera. I smiled, figuring Cooper was finally wrestling with the peanut butter. I unlocked my phone and tapped the notification, expecting to see a cute video of my dog. The feed loaded. It was black and white, night vision mode. Cooper wasn't eating. He was standing rigid in the center of the room, staring intently at the closet door. His hackles were raised. A low, deep growl rumbled through the phone's speaker. "It is okay, buddy," I whispered to myself, thinking he heard a firework. Then the closet door moved. It didn't swing open, it slid. Just an inch. My breath hitched. I watched on the tiny screen as a human hand reached out from the darkness of the closet and placed a finger over its lips in a gesture. The hand didn't belong to a ghost. It was wearing a dirty work glove. I didn't scream. My brain short-circuited. I was staring at a live feed of a man hiding 10 feet away from me, separated only by a layer of drywall. The hand withdrew. The closet door didn't close. I realized with sickening clarity that the fireworks outside were masking every sound inside. If he opened that door, I wouldn't hear it over the explosions. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. I grabbed my keys and a paring knife from the kitchen counter, useless, pathetic weapons, and moved toward the front door. I needed to get out. I needed to call 911 from the hallway. I reached for the deadbolt. Click. The sound came from behind me, from the bedroom. I froze. Jessica. The voice didn't come from the hallway. It came from my phone, still clutched in my hand, the audio from the camera. "I know you are watching," the voice rasped. It was wet and breathless. "Don't leave. The party's just starting." I didn't look back. I threw the deadbolt, ripped the door open, and sprinted into the hallway, screaming "fire" at the top of my lungs. I figured people might ignore a scream for help on New Year's Eve, but nobody ignores a fire alarm. I pounded on my neighbor's door until he opened it, looking confused and half drunk. I pushed past him, locking his door behind me, and collapsed on his floor while he called the police. When the cops swept my apartment, the bedroom closet was empty. The window leading to the fire escape was wide open, letting in the freezing wind. But they found what he left behind. In the back of my closet, pushed behind my winter coats, was a sleeping bag. There were empty water bottles, wrappers, and a small notebook. The notebook was a log. Deck 28, she sleeps on her left side. Snored twice. Deck 29, showered at 7:10 a.m. lavender soap. Deck 30, left window unlocked. Easy. He hadn't broken in that night. He had been living in my closet for 3 days. They caught him a week later trying to use my stolen credit card at a gas station. It was the building's former maintenance man. He still had a master key. He'd been coming in while I was at work. And when the holidays came, he decided to just stay. I moved out the next day. I broke my lease. I don't care about the money. I still have a camera in my new place. But now, I don't check it to see my dog. I check it every time I leave a room, just to make sure I'm the only one walking back into it. My parents' house always looked like a Hallmark card on Christmas Eve. But when you're the only one inside, all those dark windows just feel like eyes watching you. I was 26. My name is Amanda. My parents had flown to Florida, and I'd volunteered to house sit, water the plants, feed the cat, keep the pipes from freezing. It was an easy job. At 9:30 p.m., the street was dead. The snow had stopped falling, leaving everything buried in a thick, suffocating silence. I was on the couch, half asleep to a movie, when my phone buzzed. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet house. I jumped, heart spiking. A notification lit up the screen, package delivered. I frowned. I hadn't ordered anything. I tapped the notification. It opened a blurry photo of a front porch. My parents' front porch. I walked to the front hallway and flipped on the porch light. I peered through the peephole. There was no box, just a man. He was standing on the doormat, facing away from the door, scrolling on his phone. No uniform, no scanner. Just a dark Carhartt jacket and a beanie pulled low. As if he sensed me watching, he turned around. He looked right at the peephole and smiled. Ding. Dong, he jabbed the doorbell 3 times. Fast. Hello. I called through the heavy wood, keeping the deadbolt thrown. Can I help you? Delivery for Miller. He called back. His voice was muffled but cheery. Too cheery. Requires a signature. It's alcohol. You can just leave it, I said. Can't do that, miss. Company policy. Need a signature or I gotta take it back to the warehouse. My gut twisted. There was no logo on his jacket. No delivery truck in the driveway. Just a sedan idling at the curb with its lights off. I'm not opening the door, I said, making my voice as deep as I could. Leave it or take it. I don't care. The cheeriness vanished from his voice instantly. Fine, he snapped. I watched him stomp down the steps. He didn't go to the truck. He walked across the lawn, disappearing into the dark side yard. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. I checked the back floodlights. Nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was Christmas Eve. People were stressed. He was just a grumpy driver. I locked everything. Deadbolts, window latches, the sliding glass door in the kitchen. I turned off the downstairs lights and went up to the guest bedroom. I fell asleep clutching my phone. I woke up at 1:43 a.m. It wasn't a loud noise that woke me. It was the vibration, a dull, heavy thud that I felt through the floorboards. I sat up, breath caught in my throat. The house was silent again. Then I heard it, squeak. The faint, rubbery sound of a wet boot pivoting on the hardwood floor downstairs. Someone was in the kitchen. I rolled out of bed, adrenaline flooding my veins like ice water. I crept into the walk-in closet, pulling the door almost shut, leaving just a sliver of a gap. I dialed 911. 911. What is your emergency? Someone is in my house, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. I'm upstairs. I'm hiding in the closet. Okay, honey, I need you to listen to me, the operator said, her voice rock steady. Are you safe right now? I think so. He's downstairs. Creak, the third step of the staircase groaned. He's coming up, I choked out. Stay quiet, the operator commanded. Officers are already dispatched. Silent approach. Do not make a sound. I pressed the phone against my ear so hard it hurt. The footsteps were heavy, deliberate. They weren't rushing. This wasn't a smash and grab. He was walking like he owned the place. He reached the top of the stairs. The footsteps stopped on the landing outside the bedroom door. Through the crack in the closet door, I watched the gap under the bedroom door. A shadow fell across the light coming from the hallway. He was standing right there. I waited for him to kick it, to scream. To barge in, he didn't. Instead, the brass doorknob began to turn. Slowly, it rotated inch by inch, silent as a grave. He knew I was in there. He was trying to catch me sleeping. The lock clicked, holding firm. The knob stopped turning. For a long, agonizing minute, the shadow didn't move. I could hear deep, steady breathing on the other side of the wood. Then, he threw his weight against it. Crack. The wood frame splintered. I slapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. Crack. The door buckled inward. Polis, drop it. The shout came from downstairs, followed by the heavy thud of boots running through the front door. The shadow under the bedroom door vanished instantly. I heard the intruder sprint down the hallway, not toward the stairs, but toward the second-floor window at the end of the hall. Glass shattered. He jumped, an officer yelled from outside. Perimeter, go, go. I stayed in that closet for another 10 minutes, shaking so hard my teeth rattled, until a female officer called out my name, Amanda. It's safe. You can come out. I stumbled out into the hallway. The bedroom door frame was destroyed. The hallway window was smashed open, curtains fluttering in the freezing wind. They never caught him. He vanished into the woods behind the subdivision. But that wasn't the worst part. An hour later, after I'd given my statement, one of the officers called me over to the closet where I'd been hiding. Did you drop this? He asked. I looked down. Sitting on the carpet, neatly placed right outside the closet door, was a butcher knife from my parents' kitchen block. It wasn't dropped. It was set down. He hadn't been trying to break into the bedroom to rob the place. He had breached the door, heard the sirens, and had just enough time to do one last thing before he ran. He left the knife to tell me that he knew exactly where I was hiding, and that he could have opened that door if he'd had 5 more seconds.